The great hall of Ashcombe Manor smelled of beeswax and burnt sugar. Candles burned in every wall bracket, and the light moved on the polished floor like water. Silk skirts made a soft sound as women turned. A small orchestra played in the corner, but the music sat under the talk like a low fire under a kettle. The room was full. The room was warm. And in the far corner, near a tall window that looked out onto the black garden, a young woman stood alone. Her name was Vivienne Ashcombe. She was 19 years old. Her gown was grey, not silver, not pearl, not any of the pretty grey words the ladies of the ton used when they wanted to sound clever. It was the grey of old ash in a cold grate. It had once been her mother's second-best morning dress, and Vivienne had turned it inside out and stitched it back together herself, by candlelight, over 4 long nights. The seams were neat. She was proud of the seams. Nobody in this room would ever know about the seams. She had a small private routine. Every ball, every dinner, every long, stiff afternoon in a drawing room full of people who did not see her, she did the same thing. She counted the panes of glass in the nearest window. Ashcombe's tall window had 12 panes across and 8 panes down, which made 96. She had counted it many times. Sometimes she counted the candles. Sometimes she counted the number of times her stepmother laughed. But the window was best, because it did not change, and it did not judge her. She was on her 3rd count of the panes when the room shifted. She did not see it at first. She felt it. The talk did not stop, but it changed shape, the way a river changes shape when a large stone drops into it. Heads turned toward the door. Fans lifted. Somewhere a girl gave a small laugh that was more nerves than pleasure. Vivienne turned her head a little, because she was curious, though she had trained herself not to look curious. A man had come in. He was not what the storybooks called handsome. His face was too still for that. He was tall, but he did not stand tall in the showing way. He simply took up the space he was in, and the room seemed to move around him, small and quiet, the way water moves around a rock in a stream. His coat was dark blue, so dark it looked almost black in the candlelight. His hair was black and cut plain. He wore no rings. She saw the footman shift, not from fear, from habit. The way a well-trained horse pricks its ears when its master walks into the stable. He must come here often, Vivienne thought, or somewhere like it. Servants remembered him. The Duke of Marchwood, a lady near her whispered to another lady, "He has not been seen at a public ball in 3 years. Since his brother died," the other lady whispered back. "They say he does not smile anymore." Vivienne looked at him. He was not smiling. He was not frowning either. He was looking at the room the way she looked at the room, like someone who had counted the panes. Her stepmother, Lady Corisande Ashcombe, was already moving toward him. She had 2 daughters with her. Vivienne's stepsisters, Petronilla, the elder, was in rose silk. Marigold, the younger, was in pale blue. Both girls were pretty. Both girls had been trained since they were 10 years old to walk into a room like a candle walked into a dark hall. Their mother steered them toward the Duke of Marchwood like a captain steering a ship toward a harbour. Vivienne turned back to the window. She had a rule about her stepmother. When her stepmother was hunting, Vivienne did not watch. Watching only made her sick. She counted the panes again. She smoothed the small darn at the wrist of her left glove. The darn was neat. She was proud of the darn too. She had done it in 3 colors of thread to match the fading of the old cotton, and even close up, you had to know it was there to see it. The music changed. A country dance began. Couples moved to the center of the floor. Vivienne stayed by the window. She had not been asked to dance. She had not expected to be. She was the plain daughter of a dead first wife, and everyone in this room knew it. Then she felt someone stop in front of her. She looked up. The Duke of Marchwood was standing there, close enough that she could smell him, which surprised her. He smelled of rain, though it had not rained in 3 days, and of wood smoke, and of something underneath that she could not name. Something clean and cold, like the air near a river in winter. Her stepmother stood 2 steps behind him, with her mouth slightly open. Petronilla and Marigold had stopped so suddenly that Marigold had trod on the back of her sister's slipper. The whole line of ladies who had been arranging themselves in his path stood as if the music had told them to freeze and forgotten to tell them to move again. He had walked past all of them. "Miss Ashcombe," he said. His voice was low. It was not warm. It was simply his own voice, used the way a man uses a tool he has used all his life. He said her name like he already knew it, which he could not have, because they had never met. Vivienne did not curtsy at once. She looked at him. He looked back. His eyes were the colour of wet slate. "Your Grace," she said. That was all. She did not smile. She did not lower her eyes and flutter. She did not do the small, breathless laugh that Petronilla had been practicing in the mirror for a week. She simply said his title and waited. "You are not dancing," he said. "No." "Your Grace." "Why not?" She thought about that for a moment. She could feel her stepmother's eyes on her back, like 2 hot pins. She could feel the whole room listening, though the whole room was pretending not to. She could hear the small hiss of the candles and the soft rustle of a lady's fan somewhere behind her, and the far-off scrape of a violin bow. "I have not been asked," she said. He looked at her a moment longer. Then he said, "Would you dance with me?" "No," she said. She heard someone behind her draw in a small, sharp breath. It might have been her stepmother. It might have been anyone. She did not turn to see. The Duke of Marchwood did not move. He did not look angry. He did not look hurt. He looked, if anything, faintly interested, the way a man looks at a horse that has done something unexpected. "May I ask why?" he said. "Because I do not know you, Your Grace," Vivienne said. "And I do not think it is kind to walk past 20 women who wish to dance with you, and choose the one who does not." He watched her a moment. She could hear her own heart. It was not loud. She had trained it, over many years, not to be loud. "That is fair," he said. He did not bow. He did not walk away in a huff. He simply nodded, once, as if she had said something worth hearing. Then he turned and looked out over the room the same way she had been looking out of the window. "May I stand here a moment, then?" he said. "I would like to look at nothing for a little while." She almost smiled. She caught herself. "You may stand where you wish, Your Grace," she said. "It is not my window." "No," he said. "But you were here first." He stood beside her, not too close, not too far. He did not speak again. She counted the panes. He watched the dancers. After a long moment she saw, out of the corner of her eye, that he had begun to count something too. His eyes moved in small tick-tick jumps along the row of candles on the far wall. She did not ask him what he was counting. He did not ask her. It was the most peaceful 5 minutes she had spent in a ballroom in her life. Then he bowed to her, very small, very correct, and walked away. The room did not go back to being what it had been before. Something had changed. Vivienne could feel it in the way the fans moved and did not move, in the way Petronilla and Marigold stared at her as if she had grown a second head. Her stepmother's face had gone the colour of old milk. Vivienne did not care. She counted the panes. She counted the panes for a long time. The carriage ride home was silent, and silence with Lady Corisande was worse than screaming. Vivienne sat with her hands folded in her lap and watched the dark hedges go past. Petronilla wept in small pretty sobs against her mother's shoulder. Marigold did not weep. Marigold hated her, quietly and thoroughly, and used the ride to think of things she would say later. The carriage smelled of Petronilla's rosewater and of the tallow of the driver's lantern and of horse. Vivienne's feet were cold. Her grey gown was cold. She thought about the seams she had sewn. She thought about the darn at her wrist. She thought, for one small, foolish moment, about the smell of rain and wood smoke. Then she put that away. She had learned to put things away. "You will not speak of him," her stepmother said when they were inside the house and the servants had taken the cloaks. "You will not mention his name. You will not tell anyone that he spoke to you. Do you understand?" "Yes, madam," Vivienne said. He did it to shame us, her stepmother said. Her voice was flat. Her voice was almost calm. That was the worst part. He is a man of strange humours. He chose the plainest thing in the room to make a point. That is all it was. Do you understand? Yes, madam, Vivienne said. Say it, her stepmother said. Vivienne looked at the pattern of the rug. It was faded blue and yellow. She knew every worn place in it. She had walked over it 1,000 times. He chose me to make a point, she said. Good, her stepmother said. Go to bed. She went. Her small room at the top of the house was cold. Her breath came out in small white clouds, and the stone floor bit through the soles of her shoes, even through her stockings. She did not light a candle. She sat on the edge of her narrow bed and unpinned her hair and folded the grey gown carefully, seams to the outside, so she could look at them tomorrow and remember she had made them. She thought about the Duke of Marchwood. Not romantically. She was too old for that at 19. She had killed the romantic part of herself when her father had married Lady Corisande and moved her out of her old bedroom into this cold one. She thought about him practically. He had looked at her without laughing. He had asked her a question and listened to the answer. He had said, "That is fair." That was all. That was enough to think about for one night. She fell asleep counting the panes of the little window over her bed. There were only 9. 2 weeks passed. The first meeting after the ball happened in a bookseller's shop in the village. Vivienne had walked the 2 miles alone, as she always did, because her stepmother did not like her using the carriage for what she called your father's foolish habit. She had come to see if the bookseller had a copy of a book of poetry her mother had once loved. He did not. She was turning to leave when the shop bell rang, and the Duke of Marchwood ducked his tall head under the low door and came in. He saw her at once. He came to her at once. He did not pretend surprise. "Miss Ashcombe," he said, "Your Grace." The shop smelled of old paper and pipe smoke, and the sharp green scent of the moss that grew on the north wall outside. She could hear the bookseller in the back room whistling. "You are looking for something," he said. "I was." "And?" "They do not have it." "What is it?" She hesitated. She did not like to tell people about her mother's book. Then she looked at his face, which was still and patient, and she thought, he is not going to laugh. "A book of poems by a Mrs. Larkin," she said. "It was printed by a small press near Bath. My mother read it to me when I was small." He nodded. He did not comment. He looked at the shelves. He said, "Have you read the Cowper?" "I have," she said. "And?" "He is good when he is sad," she said, "and less good when he is trying to be cheerful." He almost smiled. She saw it. It was the smallest lift at the left corner of his mouth. It was gone before it had really been there. "That is fair," he said. He bought a book. She did not see what it was. He left before she did, but he held the door for her when she followed a moment later. And when she stepped through it, he said, very quietly, "Good day, Miss Ashcombe," in a way that did not sound like a man being polite. It sounded like a man saying her name because he liked the shape of it. She walked the 2 miles home. It began to rain a mile from the house. She was soaked to the shoulders by the time she reached the door. She did not tell her stepmother about the bookseller's shop. She did not tell anyone. She sat by the small fire in the kitchen with Mrs. Palfrey, the cook, who had known her since she was born, and dried her hair, and Mrs. Palfrey said, "You have that look, child." "What look?" "Like a horse that has heard something in the wood." "I am only cold," Vivienne said. Mrs. Palfrey snorted and gave her a cup of hot milk with honey in it. It tasted of the small tin the honey was kept in, and of the smoke of the kitchen fire, and it warmed her all the way down. She did not tell Mrs. Palfrey about the Duke either, but she thought Mrs. Palfrey knew. Mrs. Palfrey always knew. The second meeting was at a small country assembly a week later, and this one Vivienne had not been meant to attend. Her stepmother had suddenly decided that afternoon that Vivienne might come after all. Vivienne understood at once. Her stepmother wanted him to see her stepsisters in a smaller room where he could not walk past them so easily, and she wanted Vivienne there to make Petronilla and Marigold look better by contrast. Vivienne wore the grey gown. She had no other. She did not mind. She had begun to think of it as her armour. He came. He danced with two young women whose mothers pushed them at him. He was polite. He said very little. Then he crossed the room to Vivienne, who was standing by another window, counting the panes of it only 48. This one was smaller, and he said, "Miss Ashcombe, would you take a turn about the room with me?" "A turn about the room, Your Grace?" "Yes, not a dance? You said you did not dance with strangers. We have met 3 times now. I thought a turn was less bold." She almost laughed. She did not. "Very well, Your Grace." They walked. The room was smaller than Ashcombe's, so their turn was short, twice around at his pace, which was slower than she expected. He asked her about the bookseller's shop. She asked him, before she could stop herself, what book he had bought. He said it was a farming book about the drainage of low fields, which he needed for his estate, and she saw that this was true, and that he was not the sort of man who pretended to read poetry to impress a woman. She liked him a little more for that, though she did not tell him. At the end of the second turn, her stepmother appeared like a small, cold cloud beside them. "Your Grace," her stepmother said, sweet as syrup, "you have been so kind to my stepdaughter. My daughters have both been so wishing." "Your daughters dance very well, madam," he said without looking at them. "I saw them earlier." He bowed to Vivienne. He did not bow to Lady Corisande. "Miss Ashcombe, good evening." He left. He crossed the room and left the assembly entirely. He had come, Vivienne understood as she watched him go, only to walk twice around a small room with her. Only that. He had come for that. Her stepmother's fingers closed on Vivienne's wrist. They closed hard, right over the darn in her glove. "You will pay for this, girl," her stepmother said, quietly, close to her ear. "Do you hear me? You will pay for this." Her voice was the calm voice again. Vivienne felt something small and cold settle in her stomach and stay there. "Yes, madam," Vivienne said. The bill came 10 days later at Lady Corisande's own ball at Ashcombe. It was not a large ball, it was a small one, given at short notice, and everyone who mattered in the country was there, because Lady Corisande had let it be known. In careful hints that the Duke of Marchwood had shown a small interest in her elder daughter and might be present. Vivienne, when she heard this, went upstairs to her room and looked out at the black garden for a long time. Then she went down to the kitchen and asked Mrs. Palfrey to help her clean her mother's second-best evening gown. The grey one. Her armour. "Best I could do for you, my lamb, Mrs., Palfrey said, "is to press it fresh and put on that bit of white lace I have kept in the drawer." "The lace is too fine, Mrs. Palfrey. The lace is your mother's, Mrs., Palfrey said. "She left it to me because she said I would know when to give it to you. I know now." Vivienne bit the inside of her cheek and did not cry. She wore the grey gown with the white lace at the throat and wrists. It looked, she thought when she saw herself in the small dim mirror upstairs, like a dove. A quiet, unremarkable, small dove. She was content with that. She came down. The ball had begun. Petronilla was in a new gown of pink silk with silver thread. Marigold was in a new gown of pale yellow. Both girls had new slippers and new pearls. Vivienne walked into the drawing-room and saw at once that her stepmother had planned something. Her stepmother was smiling. Her stepmother almost never smiled. "Vivienne, my dear," her stepmother said, loud enough for the nearest 10 people to hear, "come here." Vivienne came. The room was hot. The fires were built too high. Candles were smoking in every sconce. The smell of the beeswax mixed with the smell of Petronilla's rosewater and Marigold's lavender water and the sharp, thin smell of the punch bowl. Vivienne's hands were cold inside her cotton gloves. Her stepmother took her hand and drew her forward like a mother presenting a very small child. "My dear stepdaughter has been so brave," Lady Corisande said, "to come tonight in that dress. The same dress she wore to the Ashcombe ball, and to the Marden assembly, and to the Whitmore dinner." Really, my dear, we must find you something new. It is too much for your poor father's memory to be reminded so often." Vivienne felt the room go still. It did not go silent. Not yet. There was still music. There was still the small ordinary sound of people breathing and shifting. But heads had turned. Ears had opened. Fans had paused. "Perhaps," her stepmother went on, with a little bright laugh, "we shall have to burn it for you. To free you. Petronilla, dearest, would you fetch it later? Vivienne is too soft-hearted to part with it herself, poor lamb." And this lace, she lifted the lace at Vivienne's wrist between two fingers, as if it were a dead moth. "This lace is very sweet, my dear. Very. Homely." Petronilla laughed. Marigold did not. Marigold was watching her mother's face with a small, hard interest that suggested she was learning. Vivienne did not move. She did not pull her hand away. She did not lower her eyes. She looked at her stepmother with a small, steady look, and she felt, deep inside her chest, something she had never felt before. Not anger. Not shame. Something colder. Something that had been building for 6 years in the small, cold room at the top of the house. She had not known her stepmother would say it here, out loud, in front of everyone. She had thought her stepmother would only do it upstairs, later, in the private, cruel way she preferred. But Lady Corisande had grown bold. Lady Corisande had decided, Vivienne saw now, that the Duke of Marchwood must be shown, clearly and once and for all, which of her daughters was ridiculous, and which were fit. The Duke of Marchwood was in the room. Vivienne had not looked, but she knew. She could feel the direction the room was leaning. He was somewhere behind her stepmother's left shoulder. He had heard every word. Vivienne curtsied. Very small, very correct. "You are kind to think of me, madam," she said. Her voice did not shake. She was proud of that later, when she thought about it. Her voice did not shake at all. "The gown was my mother's. If it must be burned, then I shall burn it myself. And the lace as well. I would not wish to trouble Petronilla." Then she took her hand back from her stepmother's fingers, quietly, without any pull, and she walked out of the drawing-room. She did not run. She did not weep. She walked, at her ordinary pace, past a footman who was staring at his shoes, past a girl in blue who did not know where to look, past an old gentleman who lifted his glass to her as she went by. She walked up the wide staircase. She walked down the corridor. She went into her own small, cold room at the top of the house. She closed the door. She sat down on the edge of the narrow bed. She did not cry. She had trained herself, over 6 years, not to cry. She sat there for a long time. She counted the panes of the small window. 9. She counted them again. 9. She thought about her mother. She thought about the gown. She thought about the lace, which had been sewn one summer afternoon by a woman she could barely remember, with sun coming through a different window in a different house. She thought about her stepmother's fingers on her wrist. She thought about the smell of the burning candles and the sweet sick smell of Petronilla's rosewater, and the taste of copper on the inside of her cheek where she had bitten it. She thought, in a very small voice inside her head, "I cannot stay here." She did not know where she would go. She got up. She took off the grey gown. She folded it, seams to the outside, and set it on the chair. She took the small white lace collar and cuffs and folded them separately and set them on top of the gown. They would not be burned, not by her stepmother, not by anyone. She put on her plain brown day dress. She put on her boots. She took her mother's small book of Mrs. Larkin's poems, which she owned after all. Of course she owned it. She had had it under her pillow for 11 years. And she wrapped it in a shawl. She took the small purse with her £3 and 6 shillings in it that she had saved from the tiny sums her father, when he was alive, had sometimes slipped into her hand. She took a piece of bread from the plate by her window, left there earlier by Mrs. Palfrey, who always knew. She went down the back stairs. She went out through the kitchen. Mrs. Palfrey was sitting by the fire. "Where are you going, my lamb?" "I do not know, Mrs. Palfrey. Mrs. Palfrey looked at her a long moment. Then she got up and went to the shelf and took down the small tin of honey and pressed it into Vivienne's hand. "For the road," she said. "There is a farm 3 miles south. The Widow Thorne. Tell her I sent you. She will give you a bed for a night. After that, child, you must be braver than you have ever been." "I know," Vivienne said. "Come here." Mrs. Palfrey held her a moment. She smelled of onions and flour and the good soap she used on Sundays. Vivienne did not cry into her shoulder, though she wanted to. Mrs. Palfrey let her go. "Walk quick, my lamb. Walk quick and do not look behind you." She did not look behind her. She walked out of the kitchen door into the cold garden. The moon was up. The gravel path bit through the thin soles of her boots. Her breath came out in white clouds. She smelled the box hedge and the wet leaves, and, faintly, the smoke of the ball still going on inside the house. She walked down the drive. She walked past the gate. She walked out onto the road. She did not know it then, but that was the moment the Duke of Marchwood, standing at the tall drawing-room window with his hands behind his back and every one of his very good manners still perfectly in place, saw her go. He did not follow at once. He did not raise the alarm. He did not, as a lesser man might have, make a scene. He turned from the window. He crossed the drawing-room. He came, quiet as a stone, to Lady Corisande, who was in the middle of a bright, cruel little speech to 2 of her friends about how difficult it was to raise a girl whose mother had been such a soft creature. "Madam," he said. She turned. She smiled her best smile. "Your Grace, I have heard enough." The room went silent. Not the ordinary quiet that comes when a duke speaks. The full silence. The music stopped, because the small orchestra in the corner had been watching, and one violin gave a scratched note and then stopped. Fans stopped moving. A servant carrying a tray of glasses stood still. Somewhere at the back a cough began and was swallowed. Every face in the room turned to the Duke of Marchwood, who was standing with his hands loose at his sides, looking at Lady Corisande the way a man looks at a rat in a granary. "Your Grace," Lady Corisande said again. Her voice was less bright. "Your stepdaughter's gown," he said, "is very fine." "Your Grace, I only meant—" "You meant," he said, "to shame her, publicly, in her father's house." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Every word went across the room like a small stone dropped into still water. "Your Grace, you misunderstand, I do not." He turned his head, slowly, and he looked at Petronilla. Petronilla, in her pink silk. Petronilla, who was suddenly very interested in her slippers. "Miss Petronilla," the Duke said. "Were you to fetch that gown, later? To burn it?" Petronilla opened her mouth. She closed it. She looked at her mother. "Answer me, if you please." "I," Petronilla said. "Mamma said. That is what I thought." He turned back to Lady Corisande. The room was so quiet Vivienne, had she still been in it, could have counted every one of her own heartbeats. "I came here tonight," the Duke said, "because Miss Vivienne Ashcombe was to be present. I came to the last ball for the same reason. I came to the assembly at Marden for the same reason. I came to the bookseller in the village for the same reason, though that one I did by chance and by luck. I have watched her be quiet in 3 rooms, where quiet was the only dignity left to her. And tonight, madam, in your own house, in front of your neighbours, you have burned her mother's gown with your mouth. You have done it because you believe she is nothing, and because you believe I have come here for one of your own daughters, and you wish to make sure I saw her small and shamed before I chose." Lady Corisande's face was white. Her mouth moved. No sound came out. "You were wrong, madam, on the second point. I did not come here for either of your daughters. I came for Miss Vivienne." Somebody in the room made a small sound. It might have been a laugh. It might have been a gasp. "You were wrong on the first point as well. She is not nothing. She is the only woman in this county who has ever refused to dance with me, and the only woman I have ever met who did not lie to me about a book, and the only woman I have ever seen carry a mother's gown 3 seasons because she loved her mother." If your intention tonight was to show me which of your daughters was the fine one and which was the poor one, madam, you have succeeded. You are simply mistaken about which was which. Lady Corisande's mouth opened. This time a sound came out. It was not a word. The Duke turned from her. He walked, still quite unhurried, to Petronilla. Miss Petronilla, I am sorry your mother placed you in this position. He walked to Marigold, who had gone very pale but was standing very straight. Miss Marigold, I hope you learn from tonight what your mother did not. Then he walked out of the drawing-room. He went, as it happened, to the kitchen. This was not something he had planned. But he did not know the house, and he had seen a servant girl slip through a door at the back of the room, and he followed her because he thought she would know. She led him, very frightened, into the kitchen, and there was Mrs. Palfrey, sitting in her chair by the fire, wiping her eyes with the corner of her apron. "Where has she gone?" the Duke said. Mrs. Palfrey looked up. She saw a Duke standing in her kitchen. She saw the coat, the boots, the still face. She had heard, of course, what the whole house had heard, because the whole house heard everything. "Widow Thorne's farm, Your Grace. 3 miles south. Thank you. You will be kind to her, sir?" He looked at Mrs. Palfrey a long moment. "I will be honest with her," he said, "which I think she wants more." Mrs. Palfrey nodded. She wiped her eyes again. "You go on, sir." He went. He did not send for a groom. He did not send for a carriage. He walked out of the kitchen door and down the gravel path and past the gate, and out onto the road, and he walked south. But he did not walk south at once, in fact. That is a small thing that Vivienne learned only much later, and only from another servant, and never from him. He walked first in the other direction, back around the drive to the stables. He did not go for a horse. He went into the small tack room where a young stable boy of about 12 years old was standing by a lantern with his cap in his hand and a swollen eye and a fresh cut on his cheek. The boy had been beaten that afternoon by Lady Corisande's own groom for a spilled bucket of oats, and Lady Corisande had said, when she heard, that it served him right. The Duke of Marchwood went into the tack room. He did not speak loudly. He asked the boy his name. The boy said his name was Ned. The Duke of Marchwood took a small purse from his coat and gave it to the boy and said, "You will not be beaten again in this house, because you will not be in this house. You will come to Marchwood in the morning. Ask for a man called Mr. Preston. Tell him I sent you. He will give you a place, and no man will lift his hand to you there. Do you understand?" The boy said he did. "Good," the Duke said. Then he gave the boy a clean handkerchief for the cut on his cheek, which he never asked back for, and he left. Nobody in the house knew he had gone to the stables. Ned told nobody at Ashcombe. Ned only told, months later, a housemaid at Marchwood, who told the cook, who told, eventually in the way of servants and houses, Mrs. Palfrey, who told Vivienne when Vivienne asked her, one afternoon, if she thought her husband was a kind man. But that was much later. That night, Vivienne was walking down a dark road. She had been walking for nearly an hour. She was cold. Her boots were wet. She could smell the wet earth and the wet leaves. Somewhere in a field an owl called and another owl answered. She was tired. She was not sad. She had gone past sad. She was in that strange quiet country beyond sad, where everything felt slow and clean, and she felt, for the first time in 6 years, that no one in the world was standing behind her waiting to say something small and cruel. She did not hear the footsteps behind her for a long time. When she did, she stopped and turned, and she saw a man walking on the road behind her, and she knew, before she could see his face in the moonlight, that it was him. She waited. He came up. He was not out of breath. He had walked the way he did everything else, at his own pace, without hurry. "Miss Ashcombe, Your Grace." They stood in the road. Their breath came out in twin small clouds. The moon was very bright. She could see his face clearly. His hair was damp with the mist and stuck to his temple. There was a small leaf caught on the shoulder of his coat. "I heard. He said that you were going to Widow Thorne's farm." "Yes, may I walk with you?" You may walk where you wish, your grace. It is not my road. He almost smiled. She saw it. That is fair, he said. He fell into step beside her. She began to walk again. She did not know how far 3 miles felt when you walked with someone. It had felt long alone. It felt different now, though she did not know yet whether the difference was better or worse. They walked for a long time in silence. Their boots made small, wet sounds in the road. A dog barked somewhere far off. She smelled the mist and, very faintly, that clean, cold thing on him, the something she could not name, like the air near a river in winter. At last she said, "Your Grace." "Yes, did you say something?" "Inside the house. After I left. I did." "What did you say?" He was quiet a moment. He seemed to be picking his words carefully, the way a man might pick out stones from a plate of grain. "I said that your gown was very fine." She was silent a moment. "That is not all you said." "No, it is not all I said. Will you tell me the rest?" "If you wish." "I wish." He told her. He did not soften it. He did not make himself sound more polite than he had been. He told her what her stepmother's face had looked like. He told her what Petronilla had said. He told her that he had said, in front of every neighbor in the county, that he had come there for her. She stopped in the road. He stopped too. "You did not," she said. "I did. You should not have. I do not agree. Your Grace, you have." She stopped. Her voice had almost cracked. She waited a moment. Her voice did not crack. "You have said a thing in a public room, about a woman you do not know. It will be spoken of in every drawing room in the county by tomorrow evening." "Yes, you have made a promise, Your Grace, whether you meant to or not. You have made a promise in a room with 60 witnesses. Do you understand what you have done?" "I do." "Then you are a fool." "Perhaps." She looked at him. She could see, in the moonlight, that he was not smiling and not frowning. He was doing his still face, the face that took up its own space quietly. "Why?" she said. "Why what? Why me? Why not one of them? Why any of this?" He was quiet a very long moment. Somewhere the owl called again. She heard the wet drip of the mist off a hawthorn hedge beside the road. She smelled the honey in the little tin in her pocket, faintly, where the lid was not on tight. "Because," he said, at last, "at the ball at Ashcombe, when I walked into that room, I looked at every woman there. I have been looked at, Miss Ashcombe, for a great many years, by a great many women in that same way. I know what that looks like. And in the whole room, there was one woman who was not looking at me. She was looking at a window. She was counting something. I do not know what. I watched her count it 3 times, and I thought, that is a person who has a life inside her. That is a person who does not need me to see her. And I thought, I should like very much to know what she counts, and why, and whether she would count it with me in the room after we have known each other for a while." He stopped. "That is not romantic," he said. "No," she said, "it is not. I am not, I am afraid, a romantic man. No, I do not, I think, love you. Not yet. I have not known you long enough. I am not a fool in that particular way. But I have watched you now in 4 rooms, and in each one you have done things that most people do not do. You did not lie about the poet Cowper to make me like you. You did not laugh when your stepsister trod on her own gown at the Marden Assembly. You did not weep tonight, though I believe you should have been allowed to. And you told me, on the first evening we met, that it was not kind to walk past 20 women who wished to dance with me to choose the one who did not. That last one, Miss Ashcombe. That last one I have thought about for 2 weeks. She was silent. I would very much like, he said, to marry you, if you would consider it. The road was very quiet. The mist moved between them like small ghosts. She thought about the seams of the grey gown. She thought about the darn at her wrist. She thought about Mrs. Palfrey's honey. She thought about the small cold room at the top of the house, and the small cold room she had thought she would sleep in tomorrow at Widow Thorne's farm. She thought, he does not know that my hands are red from washing my own linens. He does not know that I have been the only person in that house who could recite the multiplication tables to 12 by the time I was 7. He does not know that I sing very badly. He does not know that I am afraid of geese. He does not know almost anything. Then she thought, he knows that I count the pains. And nobody else in the world has ever noticed. Your Grace. Yes, I will not answer you tonight. No, I did not expect you to. I will go to Widow Thorne's farm, and I will sleep there, and tomorrow morning I will think about what you have said. Very well. But I have a condition, Your Grace, if I am to think about it. Name it. You will not send me back to that house, not for anything. Not for a gown, not for a book, not for a farewell to my stepsisters. You will not send me back. I will not. And you will not ask me ever to be a wife who does not speak. If we are to be married, I will speak, Your Grace. I have been silent for 6 years, and I have used up all the silence I owe the world. He almost smiled again. She saw it clearly, this time in the moonlight. Miss Ashcombe, I would be very poorly served by a wife who did not speak. I have too much silence in my own head already. Then I will think about it. Thank you. They walked on. They did not speak again for a long while. When they came in sight of Widow Thorne's small farm, with a single yellow light in the kitchen window, he stopped in the road. I will not come to the door, he said. Widow Thorne is a good woman. She will not want a duke standing in her kitchen at this hour. No, I will call for you tomorrow. At noon. In a carriage. If you have decided against me, tell me at the door and I will go, and I will not trouble you again. If you have decided for me, we will go to my sister's house at Wexford. She will keep you until we are married. She is a kind woman. She will not ask you anything you do not wish to answer. Very well. He hesitated. It was the first hesitation she had seen in him. May I give you one thing? Your Grace? I have had it in the carriage for a week. I did not know when to give it to you. I did not know if I would ever have the courage. Tonight, I think, is the moment for it. He turned. She had not noticed, in the dark, that he carried a small package under one arm, wrapped in oilcloth against the mist. He held it out. She took it. It was soft and heavy. What is it? A gown. She stared at him. Your Grace, it is silk. It is a pale color. I do not know the exact word for it. My sister chose it. I told her only that it should not be grey. I bought it, he said, the day after the ball at Ashcombe, because I saw you look, once, at another young woman's silk sleeve, and then look away. I do not think you meant anyone to see that look. I saw it. She held the package. It was very light. It was very heavy. I did not, he went on, buy it to replace the gown you wore. Your gown is your gown. But I thought that if you were ever to want another one, you should not have to sew it yourself in the dark at the top of a cold house. I asked Mrs. Palfrey. She told me about the sewing. Mrs. Palfrey, Vivienne said, is a traitor. She loves you. I know. She held the parcel. She held it against her chest. She could smell the oilcloth and the faint, clean smell of the silk inside it, and still. That thing on him, the wood smoke and the rain and the something. Your Grace. Yes, if I say no tomorrow, may I keep the gown? He looked at her a long moment. Yes, he said. The gown is yours. Either way. It was made for you. It would not fit anyone else. Thank you. Good night, Miss Ashcombe. Good night, Your Grace. He bowed. Small, correct. Then he turned and walked back up the road, and she watched him go until the mist swallowed him, and then she walked, very slowly, holding the parcel, up the little path to Widow Thorne's door. Widow Thorne opened it before she had knocked. Widow Thorne was a small round woman with a face like a good winter apple. She took one look at Vivienne's face, and one look at the parcel, and one look at the road behind Vivienne, and she said, "Come in, my dear. Come in and sit down. There is soup on the hob." Vivienne came in. Widow Thorne sat her by the fire and put a bowl of hot barley soup in her hands. The soup smelled of onion and leek and a little bit of bacon. She ate it. She had not known she was hungry. She ate 2 bowls. Widow Thorne did not ask her anything. Widow Thorne, it turned out, was the kind of woman who understood that some questions ripened on their own if you did not pick them too early. At last Vivienne said, "Mrs. Thorne." "Yes, love. May I open a parcel at your table?" "You may open the moon at my table, my dear, if you wish." Vivienne unfolded the oilcloth. Inside was a gown of silk. It was the color of the inside of a shell. It was the color of the sky 1 hour before dawn. It was a color she had no word for. She lifted it. It was as light as breath. It had small pearl buttons down the back. It had a narrow silver ribbon at the waist. She sat with it across her lap for a long time. She did not cry. Widow Thorne looked at the gown and looked at her and did not speak. At last Vivienne said, "Mrs. Thorne, I think I am going to marry a duke." Widow Thorne poured her another bowl of soup. "Well, love," she said, "eat your supper first." She slept, that night, in Widow Thorne's small guest room, in a bed with clean rough sheets that smelled of lavender. The silk gown was folded on a chair. The little book of poems was under her pillow. She fell asleep counting the panes of the window. There were 6. At noon the next day the carriage came. Vivienne was ready. She was wearing her plain brown day dress. The silk gown was folded and wrapped and packed into a small basket Widow Thorne had given her. Her mother's small book of poems was in her hand. She had eaten 2 boiled eggs and drunk a cup of tea and combed her hair 3 times. She went to the door. He was standing beside the carriage. He looked as he had looked the night before, only in daylight. His coat was the dark blue that looked almost black. His hair was tidy. His face was still. She stood in the doorway. She did not move down the step. "Your Grace." "Miss Ashcombe." They looked at each other for a long moment. She could hear the horses shift in their harness. She could hear Widow Thorne, inside, pretending very hard not to listen. She could hear a robin in the hedge behind the house. "You said," she began, "that if I had decided against you, I was to tell you at the door." "Yes, and if I had decided for you, we were to go to your sisters." "Yes." She waited. He waited. Her heart was not loud. She had trained it, over many years, not to be loud. But it was not quiet either. It was doing something new. "Your Grace, may I ask you one thing more before I answer?" "Ask." "The gown. The silk gown. Do you know what happens to a woman, Your Grace, when a duke arrives at her door with a silk gown after her stepmother has said, in front of the whole county, that the gown she owns should be burned?" He was quiet a moment. "I have some idea." "She becomes," Vivienne said, "a story." "Yes, for the rest of her life. Yes, they will say that I trapped you. Some will. They will say that you took pity on me. Some will. They will say worse things than that, Your Grace. Yes, and you knew this, when you bought the gown." "I knew." She looked at him a long time. His face was still. His eyes were the color of wet slate. She thought she could see, in the corner of his mouth, the smallest lift of the thing that in him passed for a smile. "Your Grace." "Yes, Miss Ashcombe. I would very much like to get into your carriage." He bowed. Very small. Very correct. Then he held out his hand. She stepped down. She took his hand. His hand was warm through her thin cotton glove. She could feel the small darn at her wrist press between his palm and hers. "Widow Thorne," Vivienne called back into the house. "Yes, my lamb. Thank you." "Go on, my dear." She got into the carriage. He got in after her. The door closed. The carriage began to move. She looked out the window. She saw Widow Thorne standing in her doorway, small and round and wiping her eyes on her apron. Then the hedge hid her. They did not speak for a long time. The road went past. The sky was grey but soft. Vivienne kept her hands folded in her lap. The basket with the silk gown sat on the seat beside her. At last she said, "Your Grace." "Yes, I do not know your first name." "Alaric, Alaric. Yes, Alaric." She said it again. She was learning how it fit in her mouth. It fit, she thought quite well. "Vivienne," he said. "Yes, that is your name. Yes, I have not said it out loud before. You said it at the ball. I said Miss Ashcombe. Yes, I have not said Vivienne. Say it." "Vivienne." She looked at him. He was doing his still face. But something in his eyes had shifted. Something had softened, though she was not sure he knew it. "Alaric, yes, thank you for the gown. You are welcome. I will wear it when we marry." "Very well. And I will keep the grey one." "Of course. And the lace." "The lace as well." She sat back against the seat. She looked out the window. She thought, "I am a woman who is going to marry a duke. I am 19 years old. I am wearing a plain brown day dress. My boots are still wet from last night. There is honey in my pocket. My mother's book of poems is on the seat beside me. Somewhere behind us, my stepmother is sitting in her drawing room with her mouth open. My stepsisters are learning what shame feels like from the inside. And the man beside me does not love me yet, and I do not love him yet, and we have said this out loud to each other in the middle of a wet road at night, and neither of us has lied about it." She thought, "I am, for the first time in 6 years, exactly where I am." She looked at her hands. She smoothed the little darn at her wrist. She thought about pointing it out to him, because she was proud of it, and then she thought that she would save it. There would be time. There would be a great deal of time. The carriage rolled on. Somewhere a bell in a small country church rang the hour. She counted the strokes. There were 12. Noon, she had left one house at dusk and arrived at another at noon. She thought that was a good way to count a life. They were married 3 weeks later at a small chapel on his sister's estate. Vivienne wore the silk gown. She wore, at her wrist, her mother's white lace. She wore, at her throat, a small pearl that had been her mother's too, and that Mrs. Palfrey, weeping so hard she could barely stand up, had brought to her the day before. Her stepmother was not invited. Her stepsisters were not invited. Petronilla, they heard later, had refused 3 offers of marriage in the following months, out of pride. Marigold, they heard later, had begun writing very short, careful letters to Vivienne, in secret, asking about books. Vivienne answered every one. Marigold, Vivienne had decided, was not lost. A year later, Vivienne sat in a small sunlit room at Marchwood, with a low fire in the grate. It was late afternoon. The house smelled of wood smoke and, faintly, of the roses her husband had planted along the south wall the previous spring. She could hear, through the open window, a boy's voice in the stable yard, laughing. That was Ned. Ned was 14 now and had grown 3 inches. He was going to be tall. He worked in the stables and did not know Vivienne knew about the handkerchief. Vivienne did not tell him she knew. Some things belonged to the man who had done them. She was mending, though she did not need to. She had many gowns now. She kept mending the small darn at the wrist of her old cotton glove, letting it out, taking it in, changing the color of the thread. She could not bear to finish it. It was a habit. It was her armor. It was a thing she did with her hands while she thought. The door opened. Her husband came in. He had ridden out that morning to look at a low field that needed draining. His boots were muddy. His hair was damp with the mist. He stopped in the doorway. He looked at her. He did his still face. Then, very small, in the left corner of his mouth, he did the thing that in him passed for a smile. "Vivienne, Alaric, you are counting. I am." "What?" "The pains." He came in. He crossed the room. He looked at the tall window that gave onto the south garden. 12 across, he said, and 8 down. 96. "Yes, you have counted them. I have counted them every day since we came here. I did not know." No, he sat down beside her in the second chair by the fire. He picked up her hand. He looked at the little darn at her wrist. He touched it with his thumb. He did not speak. She did not speak either. The fire moved. The room smelled of wood smoke and roses. Outside, in the stable yard, Ned was laughing. A robin sang in the hedge. She thought about the ball at Ashcombe. She thought about the grey gown. She thought about the moment in the drawing room when the room had gone silent, and the words he had spoken, and the mist on the road, and the honey in her pocket, and the smell of him, the wood smoke and the rain and the thing she could not name, that she now, after a year, knew perfectly well. She thought, I am seen. She did not say it. She did not need to. He held her hand. She held his. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then she said, Alaric, yes, there is soup on the hob. He laughed. It was a small laugh. It was not a duke's laugh. It was a man's laugh, quiet and rough and real. Then let us eat, he said. They got up. He held the door for her. She went through it. He followed, and the fire, in the small sunlit room, burned quietly on behind them, warm as a small kindness, warm as a private word, warm as a silk gown carried 3 miles on a wet road at night by a man who did not, yet, know he had already begun to love her. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If this moved you, please like, share and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive.